So Nancy in the purple over here. We're going to be following up. I got one more and I've met my goal. Surely there's one. I'll take 2 out of 3, ain't bad.
I can try, but I'm not very good at it.
We have samples. What's your name, sir?
Call me Frank. It's easier.
Frank? Frank, it's easier.
Yeah.
Frank, it's easier. I think it's easier is his surname.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easier to pronounce.
Of course, I was teasing. So that's something very simple, right? So of course, a little artifice. I'll move through them, but part of the thing is what we're trying to do is get more and more people engaged in it. And honestly, Frank and Nancy and Mary going through and writing this letter, they'll actually have to educate themselves even a little more about Move to Amend and about what it is. So what we're trying to do is expand that network. And so it's not just about membership, it's about getting the idea out into the body politic. Ultimately, a next step that we want to be doing is actually to have people start to call into talk radio and start talking about, what do you mean corporate? Look, the biggest problem around America today is corporate constitutional rights and how they've hijacked our government. We get people to talk about it in that way, so talk radio. The third thing that I'd like to see us do is to start engaging elections, where when people are running for office, they ought to be asked. We ought to go to candidate forums and stand up and say, you say that you want my vote and you want to represent me. Here is my most important issue. Do you believe corporations have constitutional rights? And if not, would you support a constitutional amendment to correct the Supreme Court? And make that a litmus test, because I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a Green, or an Independent. If you're not right on that issue, you're not right with me. And we need to actually take ourselves that seriously. The fourth thing that I'd like to see happening is more and more local communities pass resolutions opposing corporate constitutional rights. It already passed in Humboldt County, California. It's passed in Dane County, Wisconsin. They're getting it on the ballot in Boulder. I would love to see the city of Sacramento, in your next election, you could actually go through, either convince the city council to put it on the ballot or collect signatures and have a ballot initiative to actually oppose the doctrine of corporate constitutional rights. That's something that could happen. So a goal that we would have in the next 2 years is to have at least 20 local communities pass resolutions making it clear that there is opposition to corporate constitutional rights. And the reason I'm saying all of these things is that what happens is, and I hope I'm painting a picture of a movement that's coming from the grassroots up. And it's becoming so powerful that we're not looking to existing Congress people to do anything for us. We're building up so that they understand that either they have the support to do what they otherwise want to do but are afraid to do, or they realize they better do it, or they're going to have to pay the consequences.
So the main goal then would be to get it into the Constitution that corporations are not people.
Yes,
to get that wording in.
Yes. Margaret, you want to?
Oh, well, just to point out that a resolution is a statement of opinion. It's not a law. You take any local governing body takes a risk if they pass a law, because then the law can be taken and challenged in court and overturned, and there's a lot of legal expense involved. So some communities have passed ordinances, and they've mostly gotten overturned, and it's cost them a lot of money in legal fees. So we're not recommending that. We're recommending a resolution, which is just a statement of opinion or position, because that's all it is. It can't be overturned. But
look, if any community wants to do it,
elected representatives know how the voters feel.
But I do want to be clear, if there are some communities that have actually passed binding laws that include opposition to corporate personhood, and we don't discourage that, but we just make it clear you should know what you're getting into whenever you pick that fight. I see your hand, so we're going to go to number 3, and then I'll put you on the staff.
Yeah,
Frank.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say too much, perhaps not so much directly related. I was just going to say I'm kind of happy to see this gentleman come here, because one thing I noticed in a lot of different progressive, movements that, one goes to, you see a kind of a generation gap there, and a lot of people have come from, back in the time where people were more involved in social movements, and unfortunately the younger generation seems like, they're not necessarily, as engaged. So, it's important, for the long term to get them more engaged as well, which is it's wonderful to have the people that we have, because, some of us, perhaps, might have more time, to do some, active stuff. So that was, one thing that I'm kind of happy to see the young gentleman here.
So you're just getting some mad props, man, that's all, just for showing up. Hey, but how did you find out about us, though?
I just saw, I heard, I was working security for that event.
And what was the event, though? Give them some love.
The sustainability.
From the Hip Hop Congress, bro. Come on, man. Give it up. So the reason I say that is because I want y'all to understand that the Hip Hop Congress Auburn chapter is youth-led. So you're right. Young people are not coming to meetings like this so much, Frank. But I'm telling you, young people are doing dope things. They are doing incredible, positive things out in community. But we usually don't know about them. And so, yes, we invite them, but the other thing, we got to go to them.
Right.
So thank you for that point. You had a follow-up, but I just want
to... I had a couple other things, basically, I hope I'll make it short. Basically about the comment gentleman was making about, whatever we do, how effective it's going to be, and what kind of a change it's going to make. I just kind of like to remind myself, and, perhaps it would be good for others to remember, that a lot of changes, happen, like quantitative changes happen, and then all of a sudden in time, there are bursts of qualitative change. I mean, a good example, you could think of the water that's, beginning to boil. It just, the temperature changes. At some point, it changes from, liquid to steam. So, and the same thing in history, things seem to quiet, like for decades, probably in Tunisia, there wasn't probably much going on, and if somebody went there, they probably would have not noticed that there might be a turmoil just about to happen, but all of a sudden, one vendor, dies, and then all of a sudden, that revolt happens there, it spreads to, Egypt and other places. And, so I've experienced situations whereby you look at, it seems like it's quite still, there is nothing going on. But, then changes happen. So, there are moments in time when these happen. But if there is no kernel, there is no, a seed there to help that, organization-wise, sometimes, those movements, go to, without accomplishing very much, they kind of die down. So even though, we don't seem to be doing very much and we're a small group, I think sometimes, keeping these, pilots alive is useful in the long run, because when there is actually some movements, it does need to have some, it's like a fire station, it's there most of the time. Fortunately, it's not going to be used, people train, all day long, but then when the fire is there, that comes in true. Basically, and also wanted to say that, the issues, I understand a lot of us, are interested in so many issues, and so am I, but I see the point that sometimes we have to pick some that perhaps could be used as more central issues to gather and then organize around. And once that's done, then we can use that organization perhaps to make other changes. So some of these questions about other issues that we all seem to have. I think it's not the fact that we're forgetting about it, but we're trying to perhaps use this issue as perhaps a pillar issue that we can use to gather our energy.
Stepping stone.
Stepping stone. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like a collecting our tributaries into one bigger movement that hopefully can be used for other purposes.
A democracy movement is a gateway drug towards social justice. I'm just trying that out on you, Frank. But yeah, and thank you for your reminder about how movements operate. And the short phrase that I use to try to describe that is a tipping point. At some point, things can bubble over. Water becomes steam whenever it's heated up at some moment. And I believe, genuinely and honestly, I feel it. I mean, there is something happening in the culture right now. And if all you do is read the Sacramento Bee and watch corporate media, you won't know about it. But because I travel around the country, because I seek out Democracy Now! And I seek out Common Dreams, and I seek out so-called alternative media, I get a sense of that.
Yeah, just a short follow-up, sorry to interrupt, but also a lot of benefits that we're enjoying, perhaps the people who put efforts in there are not here to see, that like we have the weekends that came from the labor union movements and so on and so forth. And a lot of people who sacrifice and, put energies and efforts in there may have not seen in their own lives, but we're enjoying it. So some of the things we do, even if it doesn't show up in our own lifetime, perhaps it's going to make a difference, throughout larger scope of things.
So, Mr. It's Easier, what group are you with? Because you're clearly a social change.
I'd like to, pitch in a little bit in every different direction. I'm not really specifically a member of any one organization. Just to give you a very short background, unfortunately, I also, family-wise, I have a lot of issues that it's hard to put too much time in. I have 3 sons that I'm raising by myself without the mom involved.
Good for you.
And two of them are, one of them is severely autistic, the other one is on the autism spectrum to a lesser degree. So there are, and there were a lot of family health issues. My brother just passed away a few months ago. So, a lot of other issues that keeps me from being able to participate, as much as I would like to.
When you do, please, when you have the moment, because it's clear that you have a sense of how social change happens. So, you and Gary already know one another?
Sort of. Yeah, we've met before. And he's got a wonderful memory, so he remembered my name.
Fantastic. All right, so we had this. Anybody else want to get back on this stack or continue the conversation? I got this. All right, so watch this. 1, 2, Mike, you're 2, sir, you're 3. Nancy, did I skip you earlier? I did. I am so sorry. Do you want to? Would you like?
Can I ask you to talk one more note of his?
Yes.
About the realistic possibility of amending the Constitution, because everybody seems to be talking like this is going to take 10, 20 years.
Okay, well, let me tell you
see it
something.
that way.
It has definitely been the case that constitutional amendments have happened very quickly historically. There are tipping points. I actually believe that we could probably get this done within a 5 to 10 year window if we actually prepare to capture the momentum that is bubbling up. That's my time frame. I think that we could get this done within 5 to 10 years. And historically, that's been the case before. So, number 1.
Just, you mentioned that in Humboldt, they have passed a resolution.
We passed actually a resolution, but before that we passed a law that said no corporate money in our local
Yeah.
elections, and corporations cannot claim to be persons with constitutional rights to overturn this law. And you know what they did? They went into court and used their constitutional rights to overturn the law. But that's to prove the point that we think we have a democracy, but we don't.
Right.
And this is the key. The magic point is, do we let that realization that we don't actually have the democratic republic that we were promised, does that send us into despair and cynicism and make us quit? Or do we rise to the occasion and say, no, but we're going to? Because that's the key. And this is the thing that Frank was mentioning about prior movements before us. Every movement before us seemed impossible when it began. The abolition of slavery, to articulate and advocate to end the core foundation upon which the U.S. economy operated in the 1840s was madness. It was insane. It was crazy. And in fact, some people were shot and lynched and tarred and feathered for even advocating for it. To argue that women should have not only the right to vote, but should be able to own property in their own name at Seneca Falls was crazy. There was no way that that was ever going to happen. To try to do trade union organizing when it was a criminal conspiracy to do so, there's no way that it would be possible to ever do that. Only a fool would invest their time and energy into that. The point I'm making, every single one of these movements, Gary, every single thing that's decent and good in this country today, when it first began, seemed utterly, completely impossible to do. We're going to win.
Is it possible to get a copy of that we might be able to take to the city council here?
Yes, absolutely. Move to amend.org. There are sample resolutions on that website.
On the website?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Number 2.
Is there proposed language for such an amendment already in place?
Well,
And if so, does it say, in addition to corporations not being persons, does it also have something in there that money is not speech?
yes, it's going to have both of those two things. The actual language is not there, but you just nailed the concept down. And the 3 concepts that are up there are on that website. And we anticipate, many of us are gathering in Madison, Wisconsin. We've got 500 people already registered. We're going to actually have a democracy convention, and we're going to come out of that with the language itself. And it's going to say money is not speech. It's not just about corporation not having constitutional rights, because if it doesn't say money isn't speech, then we can't regulate the quote speech of the rich. Back to John?
No, I am, but,
Yeah, back to John's earlier question.
Right.
Who's number 3? Oh, yes, sir.
What's the process to get an amendment passed?
Once we get a movement that's big enough, the mechanics are you need 2/3 of the Congress to pass it, and then it goes to the states, and it takes 3/4 of the states to ratify it. So that's the mechanism. So I'll come to you. Do you want to correct that, or do you want to go on the
No, I
stack?
don't want to correct it, I just want,
Okay.
what is the amendment that the Tea Party wants to add?
I have no idea what the
They've been
two.
talking about having a
Balanced
constitution.
budget is what they're trying.
Oh, the balanced budget amendment.
Right.
Okay, they want an amendment to balance the budget.
That's it, just that, I thought they wanted more than that.
No, they're
No.
trying to enshrine the plutocracy here.
Okay.
And this is the thing, though. This is the thing that I got to tell you. I mean, like I engage Tea Party adherents, and about 85% of the time, I find myself in complete agreement with them. But when we diverge, it's a pretty big divergence, and I honestly don't see how they don't see that it's the plutocracy that's causing the very problems that we agree on. And so I'm trying to find ways to engage them at that level. Okay?
Propaganda, that's
You
know,
I think you're onto something there, brother. I think you are.
There's millions of dollars being spent in this country every day.
So 1, 2, 3. Who was number 4? Or was that? Yes, Nancy. And I apologize for.
No, fine. I'm here, and I imagine, or I'm interested why everyone else is here, and also learning about it. But I feel that we're to the stage where no honest person can be elected in this country that opposes anything that interferes with the profit of a large corporation.
True.
And so that's, you know, why I said, who else might feel that way?
Who else might feel that way? But here's the thing, Nancy. For me, I feel that that's the way it is now, but it's not going to be the way it is 5 to 10 years from now. I really believe that what we're like we've got to actually, if we were to articulate demands, I see you, John, you'll be on the stack. If we were to articulate demands, I think that there are politicians that would actually rise to the occasion, and that we could actually champion them, and they could be our champions too. So I see you stimulate. Did you have another follow-up? All right, well, you stimulated several different people. So 1, 2, 3. John, run.
So in response to Nancy's statement, I think that a number of people go into politics for ideological reasons. I would modify what you're saying, that they're unlikely to get elected if they're vocally opposed to profit corporations.
Yeah.
That there's probably a number, and you know what you were saying, they might step up and be our champions, that I think there are a number of people already in place that are on our side that you just might, that just aren't free to discuss it if they want to be in a position to help down the road.
Number 2?
I think that was me.
Yes.
What the vitriolic dialogue in our society today has gotten to such a point that I find it hard to follow a lot of political discussions. I'm actually pissed off. I'm not I told Gary, I'm not a political animal. I'm a reporter, but I'm not really a political animal. But this is one of the few political movements that I would consider getting involved in. I think it is the crux to pretty much every problem that we have in this country. So how do you jibe the fact I'm pissed off, you're pissed off, everybody in this room is pissed off. So how do you jibe the fact that you're going to do this pissed off movement but still have joy and fun at the same time?
That's a great question. And I thank you for that, because I guess I should really be clear about this. I think that we take that anger, but if we stay mired in anger, that is a very dangerous place to be emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. We've got to move past that anger into action, because the antidote to anger, the antidote to frustration, the antidote to cynicism is action. Productive, meaningful action that you can be part of. And I promise you, what's your first name?
Matt.
Matt, I promise you, Matt, that if you figure out what your assignment is in this movement and you just put yourself to that, you, I believe, will find that that you will start to find some joy in it. And the way that my antidote is, frankly, I also make time to go walk in the woods. I take time to go for walks on the beach. I live in Humboldt County. There's plenty of reasons to be happy. You know, so I don't just get mired in political work all the time. I recognize that I need to be a fully integrated human being where I'm actually fighting for the world that I want and that I am living the life that I want to live right here and right now. Does that make sense?
I'm with you.
Okay, so that's how I try to do it. And when you say you're a journalist, are you a writer or a blogger or a...
I write mostly about healthcare, but I do know a lot of people who write about politics in Sacramento. One of whom I tried to engage, the head of the Sacramento Press Club, and I think he was just very hesitant to get, you know, as a journalist you have to stay objective. So it's a little bit of a challenge, I think, to jump into this world. And
well, Matt, what I'd like to do is follow up with you after this and figure out if there is a way that you, with your experiences, could help me be better at dealing with mainstream corporate media. You know, and because I do think that there are lots of journalists out there that intuit that this makes sense, but they want to also navigate their own careers and their own responsibilities. So I'd like to talk to you about that.
I'd be happy to help.
Who is number 3? Frank.
Actually, just following up to what Matt says, you know, just being involved in the press and stuff. I also wanted to talk to him perhaps later because, you know, my autistic sons were involved with some healthcare issues that seems like, you know, may not be a bad, you know, person to get some feedback off from, you know, somebody who's involved with the press and those kind of issues. But on the other subject was, I hope I'm not digressing too much from the main subject, but, you know, obviously some issues are more pillar, like, you know, to me perhaps this move to amend because the corporation as a person, you know, it seems like, you know, perhaps, I mean, there is so many different factors involved, everything is complex in changing society, but that may be one of the more main pillars. And I think, you know, at least in my opinion, one of the other main pillars is that the opinions are being controlled. That's really how the society is getting controlled. In some other countries, it's more brute force, like, you know, perhaps in North Africa, but in here, it's basically controlling the way people see things, controlling the media, and media seems to be really, you know, the strong, you know, most powerful tool compared to any other thing like police and the army here, you know, in more advanced countries. So just a suggestion, if we can, you know, allow people to access more media, I think that might make a big difference overall. And something I just accidentally ran into, I wanted to share with people, is that there are, TV is still maybe, you know, one of the sources a lot of people get their news from. There is a satellite, there are satellites that are used mostly by ethnic groups, people who speak second languages, and you can get those, you know, installed, and, you know, it's free. You don't have to pay any monthly fee. But among getting other channels, you get some 24-hour news channels from overseas. And, you know, even though they have their own perspective, I don't necessarily, you know, agree with everything they say, but it gives you a different perspective from the typical CNN or Fox or whatever you get here. And so you get Press TV, you get Al Jazeera English, and you get Russia Today in English, 24-hour commercial free. And it's, the good thing is that, you know, you know, you don't have to pay any monthly fee. All you do is just, you know, get that receiver and install the dish. I know I'm digressing from the main subject, but in a way, to me, that media is really one of the biggest factors in affecting, you know, people. I mean, not so much for us. We already have our own way of getting some information elsewhere, but for the majority of the people, I think if they had an opportunity to access other sources, you know, that would really make a big difference, not only in this movement, but in general. So I'm sorry that it was kind of off the subject.
No, that's okay, but I do agree with you that finding ways to talk to each other and using media to do that is profoundly important. And I'm going to actually use that as a segue and observe that Nancy's very short, provocative question, in fact, did provoke lots of people And it made me very happy to see that y'all started to talk to yourselves. And to that end, the last part of our time together, we're going to actually try to do that in a more formal way. And I'm going to ask my colleague Margaret to walk us through that.
So this part that we just did usually takes about this much time. It's 4 o'clock. So Gary, we went back and forth on the phone, and Gary said, no, we need 3 hours. I thought, what are we going to do with the third hour? So Gary said, well, we have a lot of people here in Sacramento that want to do something. So part of what we do in our training is go through a process where people can practice talking about corporate personhood, explaining it, having conversations. And the way we do that is we do it in a fishbowl. So we have 4 chairs, 3 people, and they start having a conversation like they were in the kitchen at a party, talking about corporate personhood, and the rest of us watch. And if somebody has something to add, they jump in and take the 4th chair. And when you feel like you're done, you get up and leave, and then somebody else comes in and takes that chair. And so we just watch and see how it goes. And it's a way to practice, because one thing that's really important, if you're going to be talking about an important idea or explaining to people why you feel strongly about it, it's important just to get used to hearing yourself talk in your own voice, in your own words. So this is one way to do it. And then if something needs to be clarified, we can jump in and help with it. So.
And the stage, imagine that you would be like at a cocktail party, and those 4 chairs are, as Margaret said, the kitchen. And the way to jump it off is, you know, I was at this presentation where this guy was talking about corporate constitutional rights or corporate personhood, or moved them in. Have you heard of it? And we're trying to create a practice opportunity for you. So does that make sense to people? Does this seem like a process that would be worth going into?
Yes.
Are people willing are you willing to play along with us and give us a try? All right, so let's just move some chairs back. We'll sort of just grab your chair.